Shalom. At the yeshiva of the famous Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, an argument took place. What should be the first book of Talmud that the young boys will study when they begin studying Talmud? Now, traditionally, it was always the tractate of Bava Metzia, which deals with the laws of lost objects, returning them, and property ownership, and so forth. But some rabbis wanted to change that and start teaching Talmud with Berachot, which deals with the laws of prayer and blessings. After all, those laws are relevant every day, all day long, while the laws of returning lost objects don't come up that often in practice. But Rav Moshe was insistent, and of course, as Rosh Yeshiva, he had the final say. But indeed, the other opinion seems to make sense. I, as an educator, would instinctively lean towards teaching brachot. But as we shall see, Rav Moshe's decision reflects a most fundamental understanding of our service to God and our conduct as human beings. In our Torah reading, Abraham sends his trusted servant Eliezer to find a wife for Isaac. As Eliezer arrives in the vicinity of the city of Haran, where Abraham had sent him, and where Abraham's relatives live, he makes the following prayer. He says, "I will find a girl, and I will ask her to give me water from this well. If she does so, and then brings water for my camels also, then I will know that she is the right woman." And sure enough, that is precisely what happens. Rivka comes, gives water to the camels, and turns out to be a relative of Abraham, just as Abraham instructed. Perfect. But wait a second. Was Eliezer's prayer even permissible? The Torah forbids us from seeking signs and omens. So black cats, Friday the 13th, if the Yankees win by a score of 3-2, being perceived as a divine instruction to sell your stocks in Apple, is a direct violation of a biblical prohibition. So isn't Eliezer doing exactly this? Isn't he saying that if I say to her thus, and she says okay, and then she does something else, I'll know she's the right one? He's asking for a sign. But let's ask an even bigger question. Yes, it does seem that Eliezer was looking for a divine omen, but he didn't even need to wait for that. Because when Rivka got to the well, according to the rabbis, a miracle happened. The waters rose up to greet her. Well, if that's a miracle, says Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who we mentioned earlier, then why did he need anything else about the camels or anything? God just did a miracle for her. I mean, for sure, she's the right girl. Isn't that enough? And another question. This story is charming, but we are treated to it in a second time. When Rivka brings Eliezer to meet the fam, Eliezer repeats the whole entire story. Why the repetition? So the rabbis learn from here an important principle, that the conversations of the servants of the patriarchs are more beautiful than the Torah of the descendants of the patriarchs. Let me say that again. The conversation of the servants of the patriarchs, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, is more beautiful than the Torah of the greatest of the scholars of the Talmud, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Wow! But why? Well, the rabbis are simply interpreting the fact that many verses are dedicated to Eliezer's repetition of his story, whereas many laws in the halacha are learned from just an extra letter or a similar word. So the quantity of attention gives us this amazing perspective. So let's look for an explanation. Why is this so? The Mishnah in Avot tells us that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in the 2nd chapter there, instructed his students, his 5 top students, to go out and find the best way for a person to choose in life. Nice assignment. They returned with various answers, including have a good friend, have a good neighbor, have a benevolent eye, foresee the consequences of your actions. And then the 5th rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, comes back and he suggests that the best way to live one's life is to have a good heart. Ding! Winner! As Rabbi Yochanan says, I see the words of Elazar ben Arach because all of your answers, the other 4, are included in his. But wait a moment. How is his answer even relevant to the question? Rabbi Yochanan had asked for a path to choose, and the other rabbis gave practical things that a person can indeed choose. We can choose our friends, we can choose our neighbors, how we view things, whether we think about the results of our actions or whether we just act irresponsibly. These are doable things, but how can we choose whether we have a good heart? Isn't that just something we're born with? And how does having a good heart include all of the other things? So let's turn the corner on all of these questions with a simple perspective. something that it's easy to overlook. But this understanding comes from Rabbi Avraham Twersky. He points out something so obvious, but vitally important, that the fate of the entire Jewish people turned on a young girl showing kindness to a complete stranger by fetching water for the stranger's camels. Think about that. We tend to assume that the fate of the world depends on the meetings of kings and prime ministers, the summits of nations, and the doings of the powerful elites. After all, aren't they the ones running things? Kings, generals, movie stars? Along comes this simple story of two relatively anonymous people, which ends up literally changing the future of the entire world. I've often mentioned the words of the great Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who says that there are some people and things that had only one reason for their entire creation. For example, there was the man in the field who answered Joseph's inquiry about where his brothers had gone, inadvertently causing all of Israel to be enslaved in Egypt. All that man was doing was answering a question about, have you seen this group of people? And he says, they went that way. And his answer sent Joseph to be sold to Egypt and everything that happened as a result thereof. That man, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, existed for that moment only. In other words, his entire life, his birth, childhood, education, career, family, and so forth, were brought into the world just so he could give a Hebrew teenager directions. The impact of simple, seemingly insignificant deeds, especially deeds of kindness like Rivka's, when she got the water for the camels, cannot be understated. Perhaps the greatest proof of the impact of seemingly insignificant things is in the Jewish holiday of Purim and the book we read then, the Scroll of Esther. Because everything in that story seems random and insignificant. Even the name Purim means lotteries, implying randomness of every single part of that story. And yet at the end, they all come together to save the Jewish people from genocide, no less. And the rabbis, also in Avot, they put their finger on the one detail of the story that was the key to the entire salvation. It wasn't Queen Vashti's refusal to put on a show for the country that cleared the path for Esther's ascension. That was the main factor. It wasn't Charvona reminding Achashverosh that Haman had made a 50 cubit high tree to hang Mordechai upon. And it wasn't even the failing of the plot of Bigtan and Teresh to assassinate the king. What was it, say the rabbis, that was the key to the salvation? It was the moment when Esther told the king about that plot. And when she told him, she said she heard it from Mordechai. That's all. She heard it from Mordechai. And when you think about it, that detail is indeed critical. Had she just told the king without crediting Mordechai, Haman's bitter enemy, the king would have never switched his allegiances. Thus he would have allowed Haman's plot to advance, and the Jews would remain in grave danger. So the rabbis extrapolate that whoever says something in the name of the source, in the name of the one who first said it, brings redemption to the world. That's what Esther did. And that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. That was an extreme circumstance. How can the rabbis learn from there to everyone else? Not everybody is the queen of Persia, no matter how they may identify. And if I teach a class and I forget to quote the name of the rabbi that said what I'm teaching, am I delaying the redemption? Maybe, but I sure hope not. The answer to all this is one word: character. Eliezer is looking for character. He's not looking for signs or omens or even miracles in the waters of the well. He's looking for kindness. Certainly he's looking for kindness. And most commentators point out that the kindness implicit in Rivka's actions can be hinted at in the words, because it's getting water for a camel. Camel in Hebrew is gamal, which is reminiscent of the phrase gemilut chasadim, or giving kindness. But I think he was looking for something else even more important than kindness, as important as kindness is. You see, in Israel we have a phrase, Rosh Gadol, big head, if you will, and it doesn't mean an egotist, it means a very responsible person. A small-headed person, a Rosh Katan, will do what they are told to do without stressing about the quality of the results. But the Rosh Gadol looks at what needs to be done and makes sure that it gets done. He's committed, or she's committed, to the result, to making sure that this situation gets fixed. So Rivka easily could have been a Rosh Katan and said, well, he asked me for water, so I gave him water, and that could be the end of it. Instead, she saw that the camels were also thirsty, and so she took action without being asked. That is a Rosh Gadol, and that is a necessary requirement for the future of the Jewish people. There is no such thing as just fulfilling what's on me. I must be focused on fixing everything that I can. And that's why what Esther did in mentioning Mordechai's name was so critical, because when we say something in the name of the source, we are showing our commitment to tradition. We see ourselves as part of the chain and understand that we must keep that chain moving forward. So yes, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, is actually saying something practical when he says a good heart. He is saying something that we can do. What can we do? We can commit to having a good heart. And when we say to ourselves, if I have a good heart, how will I live my life? That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai means when he praises him. Someone who asks himself that question will then say, well, I need to go out of my way to make sure that I have the best friends, the best neighbors and influences. I should always be looking for the good in people, and I should always consider the consequences of my actions. We choose our character by self-defining. And I believe that this is what the rabbis mean when they praise the conversations of the servants of the patriarchs. They are saying that character must come before the details and the nuances of halacha, of Jewish law. And when character comes first, even the dry halacha becomes more beautiful because it comes as an expression of that sterling character. In other words, the Torah of the sons becomes more beautiful because of the conversations of the servants of the patriarchs. Those conversations teach us character, and that changes everything we do. And now we can weigh in on the discussion in the yeshiva about Rav Moshe Feinstein and the rabbis. Should they do Bava Metzia, lost objects, or brachot, prayers and blessings? The rabbis who suggested brachot were starting with the Torah of the sons. They were starting with the halacha. But no, said Rav Moshe, start with Bava Metzia, with the laws of returning lost objects and respecting property and honesty, because when you learn Bava Metzia all day long, the kids will be saying, Mentornish, is said in Yiddish, Mentornish nemen was is yemes. You must not touch that which does not belong to you. You must not touch that which does not belong to you. In other words, they will be learning honesty. They will be learning Rosh Gadol. The mitzvah of returning lost objects is the very definition of Rosh Gadol. It's sitting there on the street. Nobody told me to do anything with it. I have nothing to do with that. But I can't allow a situation where somebody has lost something precious to them. That is the definition of Rosh Gadol, and that is Min HaTorah. That is character that must always come first.